Picture a man standing on the edge of a 22-story building, rain hammering the concrete beneath his boots, wind tearing at his jacket like it's trying to pull him back from the choice he's about to make. Nathaniel Hawthorne's hands are steady, which surprises him because everything inside is screaming. Across from him, 15 feet of open air and scaffolding. Victor Brennan holds a 7-year-old girl by the collar of her pink raincoat. The girl is Rosie, his daughter. The only reason Nate wakes up every morning and pretends the world still makes sense. Victor's voice cuts through the storm calm as a man ordering coffee. Jump or she goes over. Your choice, architect. The word architect lands like a slap. Nate hasn't been called that in 3 years, not since the headlines stopped screaming his name and moved on to the next disaster. But the title still fits, doesn't it? He built this moment. Every beam, every lie, every compromised blueprint that brought him here. The rain blurs Rosie's face, but he can see her eyes wide and trusting, waiting for Daddy to fix this like he fixes everything. Nate steps forward. The ledge crumbles a little under his weight, then freeze. The world locks in place, rain suspended mid-fall. Victor's smile caught between triumph and anticipation. The voice that narrates this story, the one that's been waiting 3 years to be heard, finally speaks. To understand how a father ends up choosing death on a rooftop in Portland, you need to go back 3 months. No. Further, 3 years when Nathaniel Hawthorne was the youngest architect to win the AIA National Honor Award, when his wife Catherine was still alive, when the name Trinity Heights meant promise instead of mass grave. But that's not where this starts either. This starts on a highway, a night that felt like nothing. The kind of moment that changes everything and announces itself with the quiet hiss of a flat tire in the rain. 3 years after Trinity Heights, 3 months before the rooftop, Nate drives a pickup truck that sounds like it's coughing up its transmission with every gear shift. The dashboard clock reads 11:47, and he's still 12 miles from home, from the studio apartment where Rosie sleeps with a nightlight shaped like a crescent moon, because complete darkness makes her think about the mother she barely remembers. His hands ache. 14 hours at Precision HVAC AC, crawling through ducts and rewiring climate control systems for buildings designed by architects who still have licenses, still have reputations. The irony tastes like copper in his mouth. Highway 84 stretches empty in both directions, rain turning the asphalt into a black mirror that reflects his headlights back at him in fractured streaks. He should be thinking about tomorrow's jobs, the $300 he still needs for Rosie's medication refill, the way his landlord looks at him now like a man counting days until eviction. Instead, he's thinking about Catherine, how she used to fall asleep on the couch waiting for him to come home from the office, blueprints spread across her lap because she wanted to understand his work, wanted to live inside his dreams, how she died inside one of those dreams when it collapsed. The Audi appears like a ghost hazard, lights pulsing orange against the rain. It's pulled onto the shoulder at an angle that suggests panic rather than precision, and Nate's first instinct is to keep driving. Not my problem. Not my life anymore. But then he sees the figure beside the car, a woman in what was probably an expensive coat before the storm got to it, and something in the defeated slope of her shoulders makes him ease his foot off the gas. He pulls over 50 feet ahead, watching in his rear view as the woman turns toward his headlights. She doesn't wave, doesn't run forward with the desperate energy of someone who's been waiting for rescue. She just stands there, soaked through, like she's been waiting long enough to stop expecting miracles. Nate kills the engine. The rain pounds his roof like accusations. Every instinct he's developed over 3 years of keeping his head down, staying invisible, not getting involved in anything that might remind him he used to be someone, screams at him to start the truck and go. But there's Rosie's voice in his head from this morning asking why the homeless man outside their building always sits alone. Because people forget how to see him, sweetie? We can't let that happen to us. He grabs his toolbox from the back and steps into the storm. The walk to the Audi takes less than 30 seconds but feels longer. The woman watches him approach, and even through the rain he can see she's somewhere in her late 30s, dark hair plastered to her face, eyes that suggest this flat tire is the least of her problems. She opens her mouth to speak, but Nate cuts her off with a raised hand. "Pop the trunk. Let me see what you've got for tools." Her voice comes out hoarse, like she's been crying or screaming or both. "The spare is there, but I don't know how to—" "That's fine, I do." He doesn't wait for thanks or explanation. The trunk reveals a pristine spare tire that's probably never been touched since the dealership installed it, along with a jack that looks more decorative than functional. Rich people tools. He positions the jack with the muscle memory of 1,000 oil changes and brake jobs from his past life, when manual labor was a weekend hobby instead of survival. The lug nuts are seized tight, rusted from Portland winters and neglect. Nate leans his full weight into the wrench, feeling something in his lower back pop in a way that promises pain tomorrow. The woman hovers at the edge of his peripheral vision, and he can feel her watching him work with an intensity that goes beyond gratitude. It makes his skin crawl in a way he can't name. The third lug nut finally gives with a crack like a gunshot, and the wrench slips, tearing skin across his knuckles. Blood wells up immediately, mixing with rain and old grease, but Nate doesn't stop. Can't stop. Because stopping means looking at this woman, means conversation, means the risk of being recognized. 3 years is long enough for most people to forget a face, but not a name, not a story like his. 12 minutes. That's how long it takes to swap the tire, torque the lugs, and lower the car back to earth. When he's done, Nate wipes his hands on his jeans and starts gathering his tools without looking at her. The rain has eased to a drizzle, and in the new quiet he can hear her fumbling with her purse. "Please, let me give you something." Nate glances up. She's holding $200 bills, crisp and dry from whatever waterproof compartment rich people keep their emergency cash in. The money hovers between them like a test, and for a moment he considers taking it. 200 pays for Rosie's medication, with enough left over for the electric bill. 200 is the difference between lights and darkness, between heat and bundling his daughter in every blanket they own. But there's something in this woman's face, a kind of desperate hope that has nothing to do with flat tires, and Nate knows instinctively that taking her money means owing her something he can't afford to give. He shakes his head. "I have a daughter. I hope someone would help her if she needed it." The woman's expression shifts, and for a second Nate thinks she might cry again. Instead, she forces the money back into her purse with shaking hands. "At least tell me your name, so I can thank you properly." He should lie. Should give her any name but his own. But exhaustion has worn his defenses thin, and the words slip out before he can stop them. "Nathaniel Hawthorne." The name hangs in the wet air between them. Her eyes widen fractionally, just enough to confirm his worst fear. She knows. Maybe not the whole story, not yet, but she's heard the name before, filed it away in whatever mental folder people keep for tragedies and scandals and fallen architects. "I'm Evelyn." She pauses, and he can see her weighing whether to give a last name. She doesn't. "Thank you, Nathaniel. Drive safe." Nate nods and walks back to his truck without looking back. His hands are shaking now, blood from his knuckles leaving prints on the steering wheel as he starts the engine. In his rearview mirror, he watches Evelyn standing beside her repaired car, watching him go, her phone in her hand and her face caught in its pale glow. The drive home takes 17 minutes, but Nate doesn't remember any of it. His mind is stuck on that moment of recognition in her eyes, the way she said his name like she was tasting it, testing its weight. By the time he parks in the crumbling lot behind his building, paranoia has grown roots. He sits in the dark truck for 5 minutes, watching the windows of his second-floor apartment, where a faint light suggests Rosie fell asleep, waiting for him again. Tomorrow. Whatever this is, whatever he just triggered by being stupid enough to help someone, he'll deal with tomorrow. Tonight, he just needs to kiss his daughter's forehead and pretend the world isn't actively trying to punish him for every good deed. The apartment is a study in strategic poverty. Furniture from thrift stores arranged to hide the worst of the water stains on the walls. Rosie's corner is the exception, filled with second-hand books and a stuffed elephant named Professor Trunks that Catherine bought the week before she died. Nate finds his daughter asleep on the couch, homework spread around her like evidence of effort, her small chest rising and falling with the steady rhythm that's kept him alive for 3 years. He carries her to the bedroom they share, tucks her into the twin bed that's too small for a 7-year-old, but all they can fit, and allows himself one moment of stillness. One moment to remember what it feels like to have done something right. Then he sees the envelope on the kitchen counter, red letters screaming "Final Notice" across the front, and the moment dissolves. Medical debt. $2,600, 72 hours to pay, or face legal action. The words blur together as Nate reads the notice for the 3rd time, like repetition might change the numbers. Rosie's heart medication costs $800 a month, and insurance stopped covering it 6 months ago when they decided her congenital defect qualified as a pre-existing condition. The phrase makes him want to break things, as if a 7-year-old chose to be born with a valve that doesn't close properly, as if poverty is a pre-existing condition she inherited from her father's mistakes. He thinks about Evelyn's $200, wonders if she's still on the highway or safe at home in whatever neighborhood has Audis and emergency cash, wonders if she's searching his name right now, reading the articles, watching his life's worst moment condensed into bullet points and blame. Sleep doesn't come. At 5:30 the alarm sounds anyway, mechanical and merciless, and Nate begins the routine that's kept them functional. Oatmeal for Rosie, instant coffee for himself. Lunch packed in a paper bag because the school's free lunch program requires paperwork. He hasn't filled out, can't fill out without exposing how close they are to the edge. By 6:15 they're in the truck. Rosie quiet beside him with her backpack on her lap, watching Portland wake up through rain-streaked windows. "Daddy, why do the kids at school say you made Mommy die?" The question lands like a physical blow. Nate's hands tighten on the wheel knuckles, white around the cuts from last night that he forgot to bandage. He wants to pull over, wants to look his daughter in the eye and explain the difference between fault and failure, between what he did and what the world decided he did. But they're 3 blocks from Whitman Elementary, and there's no good answer that fits in 3 blocks. "What do you think, Rosie?" She considers this with the seriousness she brings to everything, her small face scrunched in concentration. "I think people believe what they read. But Miss Harper says truth is like math. 2 plus 2 is always 4, even if everyone says it's 5. Something in Nate's chest cracks open. Miss Harper is Rosie's 2nd-grade teacher, a woman in her 50s who treats poverty like weather, something to be acknowledged and worked around rather than judged. She's the only adult at Whitman who doesn't look at Nate like he's contaminated. "Miss Harper is right. And sweetheart, I didn't make Mommy die. But I understand why people think I did." Rosie nods, satisfied with an answer that would frustrate most adults. They pull up to the school drop-off line and she leans over to kiss his cheek before grabbing her backpack. "I love you, Daddy, even if you're sad a lot." Then she's gone, swallowed by the crowd of children who still believe the world makes sense, and Nate sits in his truck trying to remember how to breathe. Work is an HVAC system at a medical office downtown, 6 hours of replacing refrigerant lines, while doctors discuss patient care in voices that assume he's deaf or irrelevant. Around 2 in the afternoon, his phone buzzes with a text from a number he doesn't recognize. His first instinct is spam, but the preview makes his stomach drop. "Mr. Hawthorne, this is Evelyn from last night. I need to speak with you. It's about Trinity Heights." The phone feels like it's burning his hand. He reads the message 4 times, looking for hidden meaning, for some angle he's missing. Trinity Heights, the name he hasn't spoken aloud in 3 years. The building that killed 47 people, including his wife. The architectural failure that ended his career and filled his nightmares with the sound of concrete tearing itself apart. Nobody talks to him about Trinity Heights anymore. The lawsuit settled 2 years ago. Confidentiality agreements signed in exchange for the pittance that barely covered Catherine's funeral. The city's official investigation concluded that Nathaniel Hawthorne's design contained critical structural flaws, that his calculations underestimated soil-bearing capacity by nearly 50%, that his signature on the final blueprints made him legally and morally responsible for every death. He never fought it, never hired lawyers or gave interviews or defended himself in any meaningful way, because defending himself meant examining the evidence, and Nate spent 3 years actively avoiding any detailed look at what went wrong. He knows the broad strokes: southeast corner foundation failure, progressive collapse, 47 people in the wrong place when physics caught up with hubris. Catherine on the 5th floor attending a gallery opening for an artist friend probably never knew what was happening before 20 tons of concrete erased her from existence. The rest is noise. Technical details he can't bear to face, because facing them means accepting that he missed something fundamental, made calculations so catastrophically wrong that people died. Better to accept the guilt and disappear than to know exactly how he failed. But this woman, this Evelyn, who appeared out of nowhere with her flat tire and her recognition, apparently wants to talk about it. The phone buzzes again. "I have evidence you were framed. Meet me, please." The world tilts sideways. Framed. The word is absurd, belongs in crime dramas and conspiracy theories, not in the life of a disgraced architect who can barely afford rent. Nate deletes both messages without responding and goes back to work, hands shaking so badly he drops his wrench twice. At 3 o'clock, he picks up Rosie from school, and at 3:15 they're sitting in the parking lot of Precision HVAC, where he still has 2 hours of work watching her try to focus on homework in the passenger seat. She's good about it, never complains, treats the truck like a library and his tool cabinet like a desk. But today she's distracted, glancing at him every few minutes with worry that no 7-year-old should carry. "Are you mad, Daddy?" "No, sweetheart, just thinking. About Mommy. Always about Mommy. Every decision, every fear, every moment of paralysis tracks back to Catherine and the building that killed her and the signature on blueprints that somehow impossibly this woman Evelyn thinks was forged. The idea is intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure because if there's even a chance he didn't kill his wife through incompetence, then the last 3 years of self-imposed exile and poverty and shame might be based on a lie. But lies require evidence, and evidence requires investigation. And investigation requires engaging with a past Nate has spent 3 years running from. Better to stay invisible. Better to accept the guilt and keep Rosie safe. His phone buzzes a third time. This time it's a photo. Blueprints, technical drawings, the kind of detailed structural plans that Nate used to read like novels. Even in the compressed phone image, he can see enough to know these are Trinity Heights originals, and there's something wrong with the load calculations in the southeast corner. Something that makes his architect's eye, dormant for 3 years, suddenly wake up and start screaming. Below the photo, one more message. "I know you didn't kill your wife, and I can prove it." Nate stares at the screen until the image burns into his retinas. Rosie has gone back to her homework pencil, scratching multiplication tables, oblivious to the fact that her father's entire understanding of reality is cracking like foundation concrete under impossible weight. He texts back before he can stop himself. "Who are you?" The response comes immediately. "Someone who lost a sister in Trinity Heights. Someone who's been investigating for 3 years. Someone who needs an architect to read these blueprints and tell me I'm not crazy." A sister. So Evelyn isn't a stranger drawn by morbid curiosity or opportunistic greed. She's another survivor, another person shaped by the same disaster-carrying grief that probably looks a lot like his. The realization doesn't make this safer, but it makes it harder to ignore. "I can't help you. I'm sorry about your sister." 3 dots appear and disappear. Appear again. Finally, "I'm not asking you to help me. I'm offering to help you. But I need you to look at these blueprints first. 1 hour. That's all I'm asking. 1 hour to tell me if I'm seeing what I think I'm seeing." 1 hour. The request sounds reasonable until Nate considers what 1 hour means. Driving to wherever this woman wants to meet. Leaving Rosie somewhere, stepping back into the world of structural analysis and engineering calculations that he abandoned because they represented everything he destroyed. 1 hour to potentially learn that the worst thing he ever did might not have been his fault. The truck's engine ticks as it cools. Rosie hums while she works some song from school about weather patterns and the water cycle. In an hour, she'll be hungry. In 2 hours, she'll need her medication. In 72 hours, they'll be facing legal action over medical debt. 1 hour to possibly change everything or confirm that he's exactly as guilty as he's spent 3 years believing. Where? The location she sends is a coffee shop in the Pearl District neutral territory, public enough to be safe. Tomorrow at 7 p.m. after Rosie's bedtime, after the last remnants of Nate's old life have been carefully boxed away for the night. He agrees before his survival instincts can override his desperate, treacherous hope. That night, after Rosie is asleep and the apartment is dark except for the streetlight bleeding through their one window, Nate pulls out the box he's kept hidden in the back of their shared closet for 3 years. It's full of everything he couldn't throw away and couldn't bear to look at. Catherine's architecture books annotated in her careful handwriting, their wedding photo, his AIA award tarnished, now meaningless. And at the bottom, a USB drive containing every file from Trinity Heights. Design documents, email chains, calculations, the digital autopsy of his career. He turns the drive over in his hands, this tiny piece of plastic that contains evidence of his greatest failure. For 3 years he's told himself that looking at these files would be self-destructive, that nothing good could come from dissecting his mistakes in technical detail. But now there's a woman who claims his signature was forged, who has evidence, who lost someone too, and spent 3 years doing what Nate couldn't, fighting back. The USB goes into his laptop. The files open like coffins. 3 hours later, Nate is still staring at his screen, coffee cold beside him, hands shaking with something that might be rage or terror or the awful vertigo of realizing you've been living in the wrong story. The blueprints on his drive, the ones with his signature, show rebar specifications that no competent architect would approve. Steel reinforcement reduced by 40% below code minimum. Soil-bearing calculations that ignore basic geology. Load distribution so catastrophically wrong that failure was inevitable, just a question of when. But here's the thing that's turning Nate's understanding inside out. These aren't his calculations. He remembers this project, remembers the late nights refining the design, the careful analysis of Portland's soil composition, the extra reinforcement he specified precisely because the southeast corner sat on fill dirt with lower bearing capacity. He remembers being proud of this building, of anticipating problems and engineering solutions. These files are his work, corrupted his design, vandalized his signature attached to plans he never approved. Nate opens his email archive, searching for the thread with Ashford Development, the company that built Trinity Heights. He finds what he's looking for in an exchange from 4 years ago, structural engineer Morris Chen flagging concerns about the Southeast Foundation, recommending additional pilings and increased rebar density. Nate had agreed, had revised his specifications to address Chen's concerns, had sent updated plans to Montgomery Ashford himself with a note explaining the additional cost would prevent catastrophic failure. Montgomery had responded, "Understood, safety first. Proceed with your recommendations." But the blueprints with Nate's signature, the ones the city investigation used to assign blame, don't include any of those revisions. They're the original design, the one Nate abandoned after Chen's analysis, stamped and signed and submitted as final without Nate's knowledge or approval. Someone at Ashford Development changed the plans, reduced the steel to save money, ignored the engineering warnings, and when the building collapsed, they let Nathaniel Hawthorne take the fall. The sun is rising when Nate finally closes his laptop, eyes burning, mind reeling. Rosie will wake in an hour. He should sleep, should shower, should do all the normal things that keep their fragile routine from collapsing. Instead, he sits in the growing light thinking about Evelyn and her dead sister, about evidence and proof and the possibility that Catherine's death wasn't the result of his failure but someone else's greed. It should feel like relief. Instead, it feels like standing at the base of a mountain he's too exhausted to climb. His phone buzzes. A text from the school. "Mr. Hawthorne, please call regarding Rosie. Urgent." The word urgent transforms his exhaustion into pure adrenaline. Nate's hands barely work well enough to dial, and when the school secretary answers, her voice is apologetic in a way that makes his heart stop. "Mr. Hawthorne, Rosie collapsed during morning recess. Possible cardiac arrhythmia. The ambulance is taking her to Providence Portland Medical Center. You should come now." The phone slips from his hand. The sound it makes hitting the floor is distant, disconnected, happening to someone else in some other reality, where fathers don't spend all night chasing conspiracy theories while their daughters' hearts try to kill them. Nate is moving before conscious thought catches up, grabbing keys and wallet, not bothering to change out of yesterday's clothes. The drive to the hospital is a blur of red lights ignored and traffic laws abandoned. His mind can't process anything beyond the image of Rosie falling, small body, crumpling, other children screaming for teachers who know CPR and pray they never have to use it. Providence's emergency entrance swallows him whole. A nurse who's seen this panic 1,000 times guides him to a curtained bay where Rosie lies small and pale against white sheets, electrodes stuck to her chest machines, measuring the rhythm of a heart that's betraying her. She's awake, which means she's alive, which means Nate can breathe again even as terror threatens to drown him. "Daddy." Her voice is tired but steady. "I got dizzy." He takes her hand, careful not to disturb the IV line feeding fluids into her arm. "I know, sweetheart. The doctors are going to fix it." But the doctor who appears behind him, white coat and grave expression, and the kind of professional sympathy that precedes bad news, suggests fixing might be more complicated than Nate wants to believe. They step outside the curtain, and the doctor's voice is quiet, measured, designed to deliver information without causing additional trauma. "Your daughter's current medication isn't managing her condition effectively anymore. The arrhythmia suggests we need to move to a newer drug, something more aggressive." Nate knows what's coming before the words arrive. "Cost, approximately $3,200 per month. I've already contacted your insurance provider, but I should prepare you. They'll deny it. Pre-existing condition." The doctor nods, and there's real regret in his eyes. Regret that doesn't pay bills or save children. I'm sorry. There are assistance programs, but the application process takes weeks. In the meantime, my daughter needs medication she can't afford from a father who can't provide it. The doctor doesn't argue. They stand in the fluorescent hallway while other emergencies swirl around them, and Nate does math in his head that doesn't work no matter how he manipulates the variables. $3,200 a month. His entire income is $34,000 a year. Even if he stopped eating, stopped paying rent, stopped existing as anything but a vehicle for Rosie's survival, the numbers don't balance. He thinks about Evelyn and her evidence, thinks about blueprints that prove his innocence and the possibility that proving it might lead to compensation, to justice, to money that could save his daughter's life. The thought tastes like ash. Trading investigation for survival, turning tragedy into transaction. But what choice does desperation leave? His phone rings. Unknown number. Nate almost ignores it, but something makes him answer, and Evelyn's voice fills his ear, urgent and breathless. Nathaniel, I know you're at the hospital. I know about Rosie, and I know that sounds creepy, but I've been monitoring emergency calls near your address because I was worried something like this might happen. The admission should horrify him. Instead, it's weirdly comforting, the idea that someone in the world is paying attention, anticipating crisis, giving enough of a damn to violate privacy for protection. Nate's voice comes out flat, scraped raw. My daughter is dying because I can't afford medicine. I don't have time for conspiracies. I have $50,000. Evelyn says it quick, like ripping off a bandage. Whistleblower lawsuit. If you testify against Ashford Development, if you help me prove they altered your designs and caused Trinity Heights, federal law guarantees compensation for informants. $50,000 minimum. More if we win the full case. $50,000. 18 months of medication. 18 months to find a better job, secure better insurance, build some kind of stability that doesn't require choosing between rent and Rosie's heartbeat. Why do you care about helping me? Silence. Long enough that Nate thinks the connection dropped. Then, because my sister Maria died in Trinity Heights. Because I've spent 3 years investigating and I need someone who understands the technical details. Because justice matters, and because nobody should have to watch their child die over money. The truth in her voice is undeniable. Nate closes his eyes, sees Rosie on her hospital bed, sees Catherine under concrete, sees 3 years of guilt and poverty and slow-motion collapse, sees a way out that requires walking straight back into the nightmare he's been running from. I need to think about it. You have 72 hours before that debt notice becomes a lawsuit. Rosie has less time than that before her heart gives out completely. I'm not trying to pressure you, Nathaniel. I'm trying to save you. She hangs up. Nate stands in the hospital hallway, phone dead against his ear, and wonders if salvation always feels this much like surrender. The hospital keeps Rosie for observation, which means Nate spends 2 nights sleeping in a chair that costs more in parking fees than it provides in comfort. By the morning of the 3rd day, when they finally discharge her with prescriptions he can't fill and warnings he can't afford to ignore, he's made a decision that feels less like choice and more like gravity. He texts Evelyn from the pharmacy parking lot while Rosie dozes in the passenger seat, exhausted from medical intervention that treated symptoms without curing anything. I'll meet you, but Rosie can't know. She stays completely out of this. The response arrives before he can set the phone down. Agreed. Tonight, 7 p.m. Cafe Polino on Northwest 23rd. I'll be in the back corner. Nate stares at the address, memorizing it even though his phone will remember for him, because memorization feels like commitment and he needs to own this choice completely. By 7 p.m. tonight he'll either begin the process of clearing his name or confirm that he's chasing phantoms while his daughter's heart counts down to failure. Both possibilities terrify him equally. Getting Rosie settled takes priority over existential dread. He drives her home, makes grilled cheese with the last of their bread, watches her eat with the careful attention of someone who now understands that every heartbeat is provisional. She seems better, moving without the exhaustion that preceded her collapse, but Nate knows enough about cardiac conditions to understand that better is temporary without proper medication. The pills the hospital prescribed sit in an orange bottle on the counter, 3 days' worth, provided as emergency supply, a buffer against immediate death that does nothing for next week's crisis. At 6:30, Nate calls Fletcher, his last remaining friend from the architecture days, a man who stayed loyal through scandal because loyalty mattered more than reputation. Fletcher lives in a loft downtown, makes decent money doing graphic design, and more importantly has a spare bedroom and no children of his own to complicate childcare logistics. "I need a favor. Can you watch Rosie for a few hours?" Fletcher's hesitation is audible, the pause of someone who wants to help but knows helping means enabling whatever bad decision Nate is about to make. "Everything okay?" Define okay. "That bad. I'm meeting someone who might have evidence about Trinity Heights, someone who thinks I was framed." The silence stretches long enough that Nate checks to see if the call dropped. When Fletcher finally speaks, his voice carries the weight of 3 years watching his friend disintegrate. "You sure you want to go down that road? You've built a life, Nate. Small but stable. This could destroy what's left." The observation stings because it's accurate. Stability, even poverty-level stability, has value. Routine keeps chaos at bay. But stability doesn't pay for $3,200 medications, and routine doesn't resurrect dead wives or restore stolen reputations. "I don't have a choice anymore. Rosie needs medicine I can't afford. This woman says helping her could lead to compensation." Fletcher exhales slowly. "Bring her over." "But Nate." "Whatever you find tonight, whatever this woman shows you, remember, you still have to wake up tomorrow and be Rosie's father. Don't chase ghosts so hard you forget the living." The warning lands with uncomfortable precision. Nate promises to be careful, promises to pick Rosie up before midnight, promises a dozen things he's not certain he can deliver. Then he bundles his daughter into the truck with her backpack full of homework and professor trunks for comfort and drives across town to Fletcher's loft while his mind races through scenarios of what the next few hours might reveal. Rosie goes willingly, excited to see Uncle Fletcher and his collection of vintage movie posters, oblivious to the fact that her father is about to potentially upend their entire existence. Nate kisses her forehead, reminds her to brush her teeth, and escapes before emotion can sabotage his resolve. In the truck alone, with the Portland rain starting up again, he allows himself one moment of pure terror before forcing it back down where it can't interfere with function. Cafe Polino occupies a corner space that's trying too hard to be European, all exposed brick and pendant lighting and coffee drinks with names that require translation. Nate arrives 10 minutes early, parks 2 blocks away because downtown rates are extortionate, and walks through rain that's shifted from drizzle to determined. The cafe is moderately crowded, enough people to provide cover, but not enough to prevent private conversation. He spots Evelyn immediately. She's in the back corner, as promised, laptop open, surrounded by documents that she's organized into careful stacks. Even from across the room, Nate can see the obsessive precision of someone who's spent years building a case, cross-referencing evidence, constructing an argument strong enough to withstand scrutiny. She looks up as he approaches, and her expression shifts through recognition, relief, and something that might be guilt before settling on professional courtesy. "Thank you for coming." Nate slides into the chair across from her without ordering coffee, without pleasantries, without any of the social lubricant that might make this easier. "Show me what you have." Evelyn doesn't waste time. She spins the laptop to face him, and the screen displays a blueprint that Nate recognizes immediately as Trinity Heights Southeast Corner Foundation Detail, the section that failed. But this version includes specifications he remembers designing, reinforcement he insisted on after Morris Chen's geological analysis. Steel density at 140% of code minimum. Deep pilings extending to bedrock. Load distribution calculated for worst-case soil settlement. This is from the original submission file. Evelyn's voice is clinical, practiced, like she's delivered this presentation before to audiences less receptive. "Your design dated March 2019, submitted to Ashford Development for approval." She pulls up a second image, and Nate's stomach drops. Same blueprint, same corner, but the specifications have been gutted. Rebar reduced to 60% of his original design. Pilings shortened by 8 feet. Load calculations unchanged despite the dramatic reduction in structural support. And there at the bottom, a signature that looks exactly like his. This is from the building permit application dated May 2019, filed by Victor Brennan, Ashford's chief legal officer, approved by the city based on his representation that this was your final design. Nate stares at the forged signature, at the handwriting that mimics his but lacks the specific pressure patterns, the slight leftward slant, the way he always loops the capital H. It's good enough to fool casual inspection, not good enough to withstand forensic analysis. The realization that someone studied his signature well enough to replicate it, that this fraud was premeditated and executed with professional precision, makes his hands shake. Why would they do this? Evelyn pulls out a third document, a spreadsheet with numbers highlighted in accusatory yellow. Steel costs spiked in early 2019. Your original design required an additional $7.8 million in materials. Ashford was already over budget from other projects. Victor convinced Montgomery that reducing the steel was an acceptable risk. It wasn't acceptable, it was suicide. They knew that, or they should have. Morris Chen sent 3 emails warning that the reduced specifications would lead to foundation failure. The last email included a timeline projection 18 to 24 months before critical settlement. Nate does the math automatically. Trinity Heights opened in July 2019, collapsed in September 2021, 26 months. Chen's projection had been optimistic by 8 months but otherwise horrifyingly accurate. Where's Chen now? Evelyn's expression darkens. Dead. Car accident 6 months after the collapse. Brake failure on a mountain road. Investigated as mechanical failure, case closed. The implication hangs between them too monstrous to voice directly. Nate wants to dismiss it as paranoid conspiracy, but the evidence in front of him suggests Ashford Development is capable of worse than murder. They killed 47 people to save $8 million. What's one more death to protect that secret? You said your sister died in Trinity Heights. Evelyn's hands still on the keyboard. When she looks up, her eyes carry 3 years of grief that Nate recognizes because he sees it every morning in his own mirror. Maria was 22, art student. She had a gallery show on the 5th floor the day it collapsed. The same floor as Catherine, the same gallery opening. Nate's throat constricts as he realizes these 2 women, his wife and Evelyn's sister, probably died within feet of each other, crushed by concrete that fell because someone chose profit over integrity. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Help me destroy them. The request is nakedly vengeful, stripped of any pretense of justice or due process. Evelyn wants blood for blood, and she's offering Nate the chance to want the same thing. Part of him does. The part that spent 3 years swallowing rage along with poverty, accepting blame for deaths he didn't cause, watching his daughter suffer, because the world decided he deserved punishment. But Fletcher's warning echoes, "Don't chase ghosts so hard, you forget the living." What exactly are you asking me to do? Evelyn closes the laptop and leans forward, intensity radiating like heat. Testify. I'm filing a federal whistleblower lawsuit against Ashford Development for fraud, negligence, and manslaughter. The case needs a technical expert who can explain how the design was altered and why it caused the collapse. That's you. I'm a disgraced architect whose license was revoked. My testimony is worth nothing. Your testimony is worth everything because you're the victim. You were framed, Nathaniel. Your reputation destroyed, your career ended, your wife killed, all to cover up corporate greed. When the jury understands that when they see an innocent man who's been suffering for crimes he didn't commit, Ashford loses. The logic is sound, but Nate survived 3 years by understanding that logic and reality often diverge. Who's your lawyer? Me. I went to law school after Maria died, passed the bar last year. This case is my thesis, my career, my entire reason for existing. The admission transforms Evelyn from mysterious ally to true believer, someone whose objectivity is compromised by grief that matches his own. Nate should find this concerning. Instead, it's oddly comforting knowing he's not the only one whose life pivoted completely around Trinity Heights, whose every decision since traces back to that September afternoon. You said whistleblower compensation. How does that work? Federal False Claims Act. If your testimony leads to recovery of government funds, you get 15 to 30%. Ashford received $42 million in tax incentives for Trinity Heights. If we prove they defrauded the city, that money gets repaid with penalties. Conservative estimate puts recovery at $60 million, your share $9 to $18 million. The numbers are absurd, too large to process. Nate has spent 3 years thinking in terms of hundreds, occasionally thousands. The idea that his knowledge of blueprint fraud could translate to millions feels like a different language entirely. There's a catch. There's always a catch. Montgomery Ashford has unlimited resources and political connections that go back 30 years. Victor Brennan is one of the best defense attorneys in the state. They will destroy you, publicly, legally, personally. Every mistake you've ever made will become evidence of unreliability. Your mental state will be questioned. Your parenting will be scrutinized. They will try to take Rosie away from you as a character attack. Nate's hands clench into fists. They can try. They won't just try. They'll succeed if we give them any opening, which means you have to be perfect from this moment forward. No mistakes, no outbursts, no vulnerability they can exploit. The demand is impossible. Nate is nothing but vulnerability, a man held together by routine and sheer stubbornness, parenting a child while drowning in poverty and trauma. Perfection isn't achievable, but maybe simulation is. When do we start? Evelyn pulls out a document legal-sized and dense with text. Sign this. It's a retainer agreement making you my client. Everything we discuss becomes privileged. They can't force you to testify against yourself or use our conversations as evidence. Nate skims the agreement, sees clauses about confidentiality and conflict of interest, and shared liability, signs it anyway because hesitation is just fear in disguise. His signature looks nothing like the forgery on the blueprints, and that small difference feels like reclaiming something stolen. Now what? Now we build an airtight case. I need you to reconstruct your original design process. Every calculation, every email, every decision that led to the specifications Ashford altered. We need to prove beyond doubt that your design was sound and their modifications caused the collapse. The request means diving back into files he hasn't opened in 3 years, reliving the process of creating something he was proud of, watching it become a tomb. But it also means finally understanding what happened, replacing vague guilt with specific knowledge. Nate realizes he's been living in a fog of assumed responsibility, accepting blame without examining evidence because examination hurt too much. Evelyn is offering clarity. Painful, precise, undeniable clarity. I'll need access to my old computers. The firm seized everything after the collapse. I already have copies. Subpoenaed them as part of discovery. Your files are on this drive. She slides a USB across the table, matte black plastic containing the digital remains of his career. Nate picks it up, feels the negligible weight of accumulated failure, pockets it, before second thoughts can intervene. How long do I have? We file in 6 weeks. That gives us time to prepare your testimony, anticipate their attacks, shore up weaknesses. But Nathaniel... Her voice drops intimacy, replacing clinical precision. Once we file, there's no turning back. Ashford will know you're cooperating. The threats won't be subtle anymore. The warning crystallizes something Nate has been avoiding. This isn't just about clearing his name or securing compensation. This is war against an enemy with infinite resources and no compunction about collateral damage. An enemy that's already killed 48 people if Chen's accident was murder. An enemy that will absolutely target Rosie if they think it provides leverage. I need to get my daughter somewhere safe first. Already working on it. I have a contact in Montana, secure location, homeschool setup if needed. Rosie can stay there during the trial. The presumption that he'd send his daughter away, that he'd agree to separation as a tactical necessity, triggers instant fury. Absolutely not. She stays with me. Then you're putting her at risk. She's already at risk. Her heart is failing because I can't afford medicine. At least if she's with me, I can protect her. Evelyn's expression suggests she wants to argue, sees the futility, pivots. Fine, but we increase security. Cameras on your apartment, regular check-ins, panic button app on your phone. And you move. Tonight if possible. They already know where you live. The idea of abandoning their apartment, the only stable home Rosie has known since Catherine died, feels like conceding defeat before the battle starts. But Nate thinks about the break-in, the ransacked bedroom, the note threatening graves. Thinks about Chen's convenient brake failure and 47 people who died because profit mattered more than safety. I can't afford to move. I can. Consider it an advance on your settlement. There's a furnished place in Selwood, 2-bedroom, quiet neighborhood, month-to-month lease. I'll cover first and last month, you pay me back when we win. When, not if. Evelyn's certainty would be inspirational if it weren't so obviously fueled by grief-driven obsession. But Nate is in no position to criticize motivation, not when his own participation is equally compromised by desperation. Okay, we move tomorrow. They spend the next hour reviewing evidence, Evelyn walking Nate through 3 years of investigation with the intensity of someone who's memorized every detail. She's found 12 other Ashford projects with similar cost-cutting measures, 8 showing early structural problems, 3 already condemned. She has testimony from former employees about pressure to reduce specifications about Victor's threats against anyone who questioned Montgomery's cost projections. She has forensic analysis proving Nate's signature was forged on multiple documents. The case is comprehensive, meticulous, and absolutely damning. It's also circumstantial without Nate's expert testimony to tie the technical evidence to human consequence. He's the linchpin, the narrative center that transforms spreadsheets and blueprints into a story of corporate murder. Without him, Evelyn has accusations. With him, she has proof. One question. Nate's voice cuts through Evelyn's explanation of discovery timelines. Why didn't you just go to the police? She meets his eyes and there's something broken in her gaze that wasn't there before. I did. 3 years ago, 6 months ago, last month. They said I was a grief-stricken conspiracy theorist, that the city investigation already determined fault, that I should move on and let the dead rest. So you went to law school. So I went to war. Her smile is sharp enough to draw blood. I couldn't save Maria, but I can make sure the people who killed her suffer for every remaining day of their miserable lives. The admission should concern Nate more than it does. Evelyn isn't pursuing justice, she's pursuing vengeance, and she's recruited him as a weapon in her personal crusade. But he thinks about Catherine under concrete, about Rosie's failing heart, about 3 years of poverty and shame and carrying guilt that apparently wasn't his to bear. Maybe vengeance is justice when the system fails. His phone buzzes. Fletcher checking in. Everything okay? Rosie's asleep but asking when you'll be back. The reminder of his daughter waiting, trusting him to return, anchors Nate to something larger than revenge. Whatever happens with this case, however it unfolds, he's still a father first. The rest is context and complication. I need to go, but I'm in. We do this. Evelyn nods, no celebration, just grim acknowledgement of a contract signed. Meeting here same time every Tuesday and Thursday. We have 6 weeks to prepare you for the most hostile cross-examination you'll ever experience. They will try to break you. We make sure they can't. Nate stands, pockets the USB drive, feels the weight of evidence and potential in his jacket. At the cafe door he pauses, looks back at Evelyn surrounded by her carefully organized conspiracy and voices, the question that's been building since she first mentioned her sister. Why me? You could hire an expert witness, someone with credentials and reputation intact. Why recruit a disgraced architect who can barely pay rent? Evelyn's answer comes without hesitation. Because you're not doing this for money, or fame, or professional obligation. You're doing it for the same reason I am. Because they took someone we loved and turned their death into a line item on a balance sheet. That kind of motivation can't be faked, Nathaniel. And when you testify, when you explain to a jury how your wife died because of someone else's greed, they'll believe you. Because you'll be telling the truth. The observation lands with uncomfortable accuracy. Nate nods once and escapes into Portland rain that feels like baptism, cold and cleansing and insufficient to wash away 3 years of accumulated grief. The drive to Fletcher's loft passes in silence, his mind already cataloging the work ahead, reviewing calculations, reconstructing timeline, preparing to defend technical decisions made when he still believed the world rewarded competence instead of punishing it. Fletcher opens his door with the expression of someone who knows the answer before asking the question. How bad? They framed me, forged my signature, cut corners that killed Catherine, and now they're going to try to destroy me for exposing it. Jesus, Nate. Yeah. Rosie is asleep on Fletcher's guest bed, small and perfect, and heartbreakingly vulnerable. Nate watches her breathe for a long moment, counting heartbeats that feel more precious now that he understands how easily they can stop. Tomorrow he'll move her to a new apartment, upend her routine, add security measures that will scare her even as he pretends they're normal. Tomorrow he'll start the process of becoming a whistleblower and a target and a father trying to shield his child from consequences he can't control. Tonight he just sits beside her bed holding her hand, promising silently that whatever comes next, she'll be safe. It's a promise he has no certainty he can keep, but uncertainty has never stopped fathers from making vows to daughters who deserve better than the world provides. The drive home takes him past Trinity Heights, or what remains of it. The site has been cleared, fenced off, marked for redevelopment that never quite materializes because nobody wants to build on ground soaked with that much blood. Nate slows the truck, stares at empty space where Catherine spent her last moments, and allows himself something he hasn't permitted in 3 years' rage. Not the diffuse shame-guilt that's been his constant companion, but clean, focused fury at Montgomery Ashford and Victor Brennan and every person who chose $8 million over 47 lives. The rage feels dangerous and clarifying, and Nate understands why Evelyn has spent 3 years cultivating it. Anger provides energy when grief becomes exhausting. His apartment feels violated now, contaminated by knowledge of the break-in and threats. Nate packs methodically, sorting their few possessions into categories: essential, sentimental, disposable. Most of their life fits into 4 boxes and 3 garbage bags, poverty's one advantage being enforced minimalism. By 3 a.m., he's done the apartment stripped to generic rental status, no evidence remaining that Nathaniel Hawthorne and daughter ever occupied this space. Sleep is impossible, so Nate opens his laptop and inserts Evelyn's USB drive. The files are exactly as he remembers, organized by project phase, dense with calculations and correspondence and the optimistic assumption that good work matters. He opens the Trinity Heights folder, sees emails with Montgomery discussing budget and timeline, messages with Morris Chen analyzing geological surveys, his own notes documenting decisions and justifications. They're buried in a thread from April 2019 is the smoking gun Morris Chen's third warning email, the one Evelyn mentioned. Subject line: Urgent. Trinity Heights Foundation. Failure projection. The body text is clinical and devastating. Nathaniel, based on the reduced rebar specifications filed with the city, I'm projecting foundation failure in the southeast corner within 18 to 24 months of building occupancy. Differential settlement will exceed 8 inches, triggering progressive collapse in the load-bearing walls. Recommend immediate revision to original specifications. If cost is the concern, I'd rather see the project delayed than built to fail. Nate's response, sent the same day: agreed completely. I'm not comfortable with the reduced specs and never approved them. Meeting with Montgomery tomorrow to address this. Thanks for the diligence, Morris. But there's no record of that meeting, no follow-up email, no documentation that Nate ever confronted Montgomery about the unauthorized changes. Because the meeting never happened. Nate remembers now, with the clarity of trauma revisited. He'd scheduled the meeting, prepared, his argument printed, Chen's analysis. But the day before the meeting, Catherine called from the doctor with news that her pregnancy had complications, that she needed emergency surgery, that their insurance would only cover part of it. The surgery cost $43,000. Nate's savings covered $11,000. Montgomery Ashford, in a moment that seemed like generosity but now reveals itself as manipulation, offered a bonus $50,000 for expediting the Trinity Heights timeline, for signing off on minor specification adjustments, for being a team player instead of a perfectionist. Nate had taken the money. Told himself the reduced rebar was probably fine, that Chen was being overcautious, that engineers always built in excessive safety margins. He'd signed the revised blueprints without reviewing them carefully. Trusted that Montgomery's firm had run the calculations, prioritized Catherine's health over structural integrity. The realization hits like physical force. He didn't forge the signature, but he did approve the changes. Not knowingly, not understanding the implications, but his name is on the final documents because he put it there. The fraud was having him sign revisions he didn't fully review, but the signature itself is genuine. Nate's hands shake as he searches for the signed document, finds it in a subfolder labeled Final Permits. His signature, undeniably, his beneath specifications he now understands guaranteed failure. The forgery Evelyn showed him must be on the original design documents, creating a false narrative that Nate specified the fatal reductions from the beginning. But this signature, the one that actually went to the city, is real. Which means Nate isn't innocent. He's complicit. He took money to ignore warnings, to expedite approval, to be the respectable face on documents he should have rejected. Catherine died because he needed $43,000 and Montgomery offered $50,000. The laptop screen blurs as Nate's vision fails, tears or exhaustion or the complete dissolution of the narrative he's been building since Evelyn first showed him evidence of fraud. He's not a victim. He's an accomplice who got away with involuntary manslaughter because the real criminals were happy to let him take full blame. His phone buzzes. Evelyn texting at 3:30 a.m. like sleep is optional. Reviewed the files yet? Call me when you're ready to discuss strategy. Strategy. She wants strategy when Nate has just discovered he's guilty after all, that 3 years of shame were justified, that clearing his name means admitting he sold his integrity for surgery money and his wife died because of it. He should call her now, confess the truth, end this crusade before it begins. But there's Rosie upstairs at Fletcher's, And there's $3,200 he doesn't have for medication she needs, and there's a choice between honesty and survival that shouldn't exist, but does. Nate makes the call. Evelyn answers on the first ring alert, despite the hour. You found it. Found what? The signature. The real one on the revised documents. You're wondering if that makes you guilty. Her clairvoyance is unnerving. Doesn't it? Did you understand what you were signing? No. But I should have. I'm an architect. Reading blueprints is literally my job. You're also a husband whose wife needed surgery. Montgomery exploited that. Offered money with conditions he disguised as routine. That's fraud, Nathaniel. Inducement through deception. The legal parsing feels like rationalization, but Nate wants to believe it because the alternative is accepting that he killed Catherine through willful negligence. I still signed the document. Under false pretenses. Montgomery told you the changes were minor optimization, didn't he? Cost savings that wouldn't impact structural integrity. Nate thinks back, memory fog obscuring details. I don't remember specifically. We'll find the conversation. Email text recording if we're lucky. There's always evidence. And Nathaniel. Even if you signed knowing the risks, which you didn't, your culpability is a fraction of theirs. You made one compromised decision under financial duress. They made a systematic choice to defraud the city and murder anyone who got in the way. The comparison provides some comfort, but Nate understands it's a matter of degree rather than kind. He's still complicit, still guilty, still responsible for deaths that include his wife. When we go to trial, this comes out. The defense will use it to destroy my credibility. They'll try. We get ahead of it. You testify about the surgery, the financial pressure, the lack of understanding about what you were approving. The jury sees a desperate husband who made a mistake, not a corrupt architect who knowingly endangered lives. Sympathy is a powerful force. Evelyn's confidence feels misplaced, but she's the lawyer, and he's the disgraced architect whose judgment has already proven catastrophically flawed. Trusting her is another compromised decision in a long chain of them. Okay, we proceed. But I'm telling you now, if protecting Rosie requires abandoning this case, I walk. No hesitation, no negotiation. Understood. Your daughter comes first. But Nathaniel. The best protection for Rosie is destroying Ashford completely. As long as they have power, she's in danger. We finish this, they can't hurt her anymore. The logic is sound enough to override objection. Nate agrees to meet Tuesday for their first preparation session, hangs up, and sits in his violated apartment, watching dawn gray the windows. In 6 hours he'll move to Selwood, establish new routines, begin the process of preparing testimony that will either vindicate or damn him, depending on which facts the jury weighs most heavily. The USB drive sits on the table, matte black plastic, containing evidence of his failure and possibly his redemption. Nate pockets its shoulders one of the packed boxes and begins the work of relocating his life before it gets repossessed by forces he's only beginning to understand. 12 days since the highway encounter. 10 days since Rosie collapsed at school and Nate's world fractured into before and after. 4 days since the gray sedan first appeared across from their Selwood apartment, rotating drivers but maintaining constant surveillance like a patient predator waiting for the right moment to strike. The apartment sits above a bakery that starts prep at 5 a.m., filling their stairwell with scents that remind Nate of normalcy he can no longer afford. Rosie has adapted with the resilience of children who don't yet understand that stability is provisional. The debt notice sits on the kitchen counter. 12 days overdue. Now red letters screaming, "Final warning." Collection agencies call twice daily. Nate's stopped answering his phone entirely, except for Rosie's school and Evelyn's increasingly urgent texts about preparation schedules and filing deadlines. Tonight is Tuesday, their second strategy session at Cafe Polino. Nate drives through rain that's shifted from autumn drizzle to winter assault, checking his mirrors obsessively. The sedan follows for 3 miles before peeling off, and Nate spends the remaining drive wondering what information his route just provided to whoever is compiling the file that will be used to destroy him. Evelyn is waiting in their back corner, surrounded by documents that have multiplied since their last meeting. She looks up as he approaches, and there's something different tonight, an edge of barely contained urgency. Montgomery Ashford checked into Providence Hospital yesterday. Stage 4 lung cancer metastasized to liver and spine. His doctors are giving him 6 months optimistically. Nate sits, doesn't bother ordering coffee because his stomach hasn't tolerated caffeine since Rosie's collapse. So the case dies with him. Opposite. His mortality makes him vulnerable. I need you to see him first. Alone. Gauge if he's capable of honesty before lawyers rebuild the walls. The timeline is aggressive, designed to prevent overthinking. Nate should object, should demand time to prepare, should do anything except nod agreement. But preparation is just another word for hesitation. Give me the room number. Providence Hospital at 10 p.m. is quieter than Nate remembers from Rosie's stay. The urgency of daytime emergencies replaced by slower rhythms of long-term suffering. He finds himself standing outside room 814 with absolutely no plan beyond confrontation. Montgomery Ashford looks like cancer has been working overtime, hollowing him from inside, leaving only architectural scaffolding of what used to be a man. He's awake despite the hour propped on pillows that emphasize rather than disguise his deterioration, oxygen cannula running from wall to nose. His eyes track Nate's entrance with recognition that might be resignation. "Mr. Hawthorne, Evelyn said you'd come." His voice is scraped raw. "You want to know if I feel guilty." "Do you?" "Every day. But guilt doesn't resurrect the dead." Montgomery shifts winces from pain that medication can only dull. "You're here to ask for testimony. Evelyn wants me to give her Victor, and in exchange you both pretend I'm victim instead of architect of disaster." "Were you the architect, I mean? Or was Victor running the company while you took credit?" Montgomery's laugh is bitter and wet. "I built Ashford Development from nothing. 40 years of work, 52 buildings, 30,000 people housed. Victor was brilliant legal counsel who understood how to navigate regulations I found tedious. I gave him authority because delegation seemed like competent management. And he used that authority to cut corners that killed people. He used that authority to optimize costs in ways I didn't scrutinize carefully enough. There's a difference between malice and negligence, Nathaniel. I'm guilty of the latter. Victor is pure calculation." Nate wants to believe Montgomery's story, wants to accept that the CEO was just another victim of Victor's manipulation. But Evelyn's evidence showed emails with Montgomery's name approving the cost reductions in his own words. Proceed with Victor's optimization recommendations, steel variants acceptable for timeline preservation. Either Montgomery was lying now to preserve his deathbed dignity, or he'd been lying then about understanding the risks. Or maybe, and this felt truest, he'd told himself the lies so many times he'd started believing them. Self-deception as survival mechanism. "You knew," Nate said quietly. "Maybe not the full extent. Maybe you convinced yourself Victor had it under control, but you knew corners were being cut, and you approved it anyway." Montgomery's eyes closed. When he spoke, his voice was smaller. "Yes, I knew there were compromises. Victor assured me they were within acceptable margins. I wanted to believe him because believing saved $8 million. A tear tracked down his hollow cheek. "I'm not a victim, Nathaniel. I'm a coward who let a sociopath make my decisions so I could sleep at night." The admission carries more weight than all the rationalizations before it. Nate thinks about his own signature on revised blueprints, his acceptance of $50,000 to expedite approval without proper review. "Morris Chen sent you 3 emails warning about foundation failure. I forwarded them to Victor for technical review. He assured me Chen was overcautious, that our engineers had run the calculations and confirmed adequate safety margins." Montgomery meets Nate's eyes. "I trusted the wrong expert. That trust cost 47 lives. Chen is dead. Convenient brake failure 6 months after the collapse. Victor arranged that. I didn't know until afterward, and by then confronting him meant admitting I'd enabled murder. Cowardice, not complicity, though I understand the distinction matters less to the dead. Tell this to the court. Testify against Victor." Montgomery's expression hardens despite his physical fragility. "I can't. Victor has leverage. My wife died 2 years ago believing I was a man of integrity. He has evidence of financial crime she committed. 3,000 foster children depend on the foundation she built. Victor threatens to release the evidence if I testify. She's dead. Her reputation is abstractions. Her foundation is 3,000 real children who lose support if donations evaporate. Victor doesn't threaten me, he threatens everyone I ever loved. That's his genius." Nate thinks about Rosie, about how easily his daughter could become a weapon in Victor's defensive architecture. Then we find evidence that doesn't require your testimony. You're describing years of investigation with resources you don't have. Victor has an entire firm, unlimited budget, decades of experience burying evidence. We'll see. Nate stands to leave, but Montgomery's voice stops him. The whistleblower compensation Evelyn promised you, 9 to 18 million. That only pays if you can prove intentional fraud against government, not just negligent cost-cutting. Victor handled the federal tax incentive applications. If he lied on those applications to secure the 42 million in incentives, it's fraud. Proving it requires documents Victor has spent 3 years destroying. The admission should undermine Nate's participation, but he's already past the point where financial incentive drives decisions. Thanks for the warning. I'm dying. Lying seems pointless now. Montgomery closes his eyes. Be careful, Nathaniel. Victor is smarter than both of us, and he's already 3 moves ahead of wherever you think you are. Nate leaves without responding, walks hospital corridors that feel contaminated by knowledge of systematic evil dressed in professional competence. His phone buzzes before he reaches the parking structure. Unknown number text message designed to prove Montgomery's point about Victor's omniscience. Talking to Montgomery was predictable. Call this number in the next 10 minutes or Rosie's teacher receives evidence of your mental instability. Photos, erratic behavior, documentation, concerns about child welfare. Your choice. He forwards the text to Evelyn. Her reply arrives as Nate reaches his truck. Don't call him. I'm filing the lawsuit tonight instead of tomorrow. Once we're on record, any action against you becomes witness intimidation. Federal crime with actual consequences. Victor is bluffing because he thinks you'll fold. Prove him wrong. Nate's hands shake as he starts the truck, torn between competing instincts that both feel like tactical errors. His phone rings. The same unknown number. He answers. Victor Brennan's voice fills the truck cab with professional smoothness that somehow makes the threats more disturbing than if he'd shouted them. Mr. Hawthorne, I'm disappointed. I offered reasonable discussion. You chose escalation. Nate's throat is tight with rage that's been building for 12 days, 3 years, maybe his entire adult life. You threaten my daughter, you'll do nothing, because you're a father, not a fighter. I don't need to win, I just need you to lose. Victor's laugh is genuine, almost admiring. Admirable sentiment, terrible strategy. Here's reality. I have files on everyone. I've spent 30 years building leverage that makes prosecution impossible. You think filing a lawsuit frightens me? Then why are you calling? If I'm no threat, why waste time on warnings? Brief silence. Nate realizes he's found an edge, however small. Victor isn't calling because Nate is harmless. Walking away now preserves what little you've built. Continuing costs you everything, including Rosie's custody. I choose destroying you. However long it takes, whatever it costs. You killed my wife. You don't get to walk away unpunished. Your wife died because Montgomery Ashford approved cost reductions and you signed off without proper review. I just facilitated the paperwork. We're all complicit, Nathaniel. The casual admission of shared guilt is designed to break Nate's moral certainty, but whatever he did wrong, it's fractional compared to Victor's calculated malice. The difference is, I'm trying to fix my mistake. You're trying to hide yours. The line goes dead. His phone buzzes immediately. Evelyn. I'm filing tonight. Emergency motion, whistleblower protection, the works. Get home. Stay with Rosie. Don't answer the door for anyone except police with warrant. Nate drives back to Selwood through streets that feel actively hostile. The gray sedan is gone from its usual position, which somehow feels more ominous than its presence. He parks 2 blocks away, approaches their building from the back entrance, checks every shadow before climbing stairs. The apartment is dark and quiet. Rosie sleeps in her room, nightlight casting shadows that look like protection, but aren't. Nate stands in her doorway counting breaths, watching her chest rise and fall with the fragile regularity of a heart that's been betraying her since birth. His phone buzzes. Fletcher. Saw the news. Evelyn filed lawsuit an hour ago. You okay? News. It's public now, which means Victor knows they've escalated. Nate texts back. We're committed now. No turning back. Fletcher's response. You need somewhere safe. I have space. Nate is still weighing options when someone knocks on his door. 3 precise raps, official sounding. He checks the peephole. A woman in her 50s, professional clothing, carrying a leather portfolio. Nate opens the door with the chain engaged. "Can I help you?" "Mr. Hawthorne, I'm Rebecca Chen. Morris Chen was my husband. I believe we should talk about Victor Brennan before anyone else dies." Morris Chen, the engineer who warned about Trinity Heights Foundation failure, who died in a convenient brake failure that Montgomery just confirmed, was murder. Nate's voice comes out steady despite his racing heart. "How did you find me?" "Evelyn Ashford's lawsuit became public record 2 hours ago. Your name is on the filing as primary witness. I've been monitoring federal court PACER system for 3 years. The moment your name appeared, I knew. I've been parked 2 blocks away for 6 hours, waiting for the right moment. Didn't want to approach while Victor's surveillance was active." The explanation makes tactical sense. Nate studies her through the door crack. Rebecca Chen looks tired and determined and grieving in ways that feel genuine. "Why now? Why not go to police 3 years ago when your husband died?" "I did. They called it mechanical failure, closed the case in 4 days. I hired private investigators who all mysteriously developed other priorities. I collected evidence that prosecutors called insufficient. So I waited. For someone who could make the evidence matter." She pulls a flash drive from her portfolio. Everything Morris collected before he died: emails, calculations, photos, and recordings. Morris started recording his meetings with Victor after the second warning got ignored. "If you have all that, why do you need me?" "Because I'm the widow with obvious bias. You're the architect they framed the witness who makes the technical evidence comprehensible. Together we're a case. Separately, we're just damaged people making accusations." Nate calls Evelyn while watching Rebecca through the peephole. Evelyn answers on the first ring. "Please tell me you didn't call Victor back." "Rebecca Chen is at my door. Morris Chen's widow says she has recordings and evidence. This real, or am I about to let a Victor operative into my apartment?" Silence, then rapid typing. "Rebecca Chen, 54, married to Morris Chen for 26 years, filed wrongful death lawsuit that got dismissed on technicalities. She's real, and if she has Morris's files, we just got the smoking gun we needed." Nate opens the door fully. Rebecca enters with cautious relief, sets the portfolio on his kitchen counter, pulls out the flash drive plus a thick folder. "Morris knew he was in danger. The last month before he died, he told me Victor had started making threats disguised as friendly advice. Morris started documenting everything." She spreads documents across the counter. Email chains between Victor and materials suppliers. Photographs of rebar deliveries showing 30% less steel than manifests claimed. Financial records proving Montgomery's firm collected rebates for the cost reductions. And recordings. Rebecca pulls out a small digital recorder. "Morris wore a wire to his last 3 meetings with Victor. Victor didn't know Morris was recording. The equipment was disguised as a Mont Blanc pen anniversary gift I gave Morris. Victor complimented it once, never suspected." She presses play. Victor Brennan's voice fills Nate's kitchen, younger but recognizable. "Morris, I appreciate the diligence, but you're creating problems where none exist. The reduced rebar is within acceptable variance. Nathaniel's original design called for more steel, but architects always overspecify." Morris Chen's voice responds firmer than Nate expected. "The soil-bearing capacity doesn't support optimization. We need the additional reinforcement, or we're looking at settlement failure within 2 years. Then we have 2 years to implement remediation if your projections prove accurate, which they won't because our structural engineers have confirmed adequate safety margins." I'm documenting this conversation as formal objection to the reductions. Victor's laugh is cold. "Document whatever makes you comfortable. But understand that persistent objections become patterns that HR notices. Patterns that suggest difficult collaboration, limited team perspective, professional inflexibility that limits advancement opportunities." The threat is subtle and completely clear. The recording stops. Rebecca's eyes are wet, but her voice is steady. "That was 6 weeks before the collapse. Morris sent his final warning email the next day. 3 weeks later, his brake lines failed on Highway 26. The parallel is too precise to be accident. Nate takes the flash drive, feels the negligible weight of evidence that might finally make Catherine's death mean something beyond tragedy. "What do you want in return?" "I want Victor in prison. I want Morris's death acknowledged as murder. I want the world to know my husband died trying to save lives while Victor Brennan prioritized profit." Rebecca's voice breaks finally. "And I want to watch Victor's face when he realizes he can't threaten or buy or manipulate his way out of consequences anymore." Nate calls Evelyn back, explains the development. Bring Rebecca to my office, now. We need to authenticate this evidence and prepare supplemental filing before Victor can suppress it. The next 4 hours pass in a blur. Evelyn's office is cramped and cluttered walls covered with evidence boards. By 4 a.m., they have a supplemental filing that includes Morris Chen's recordings, Rebecca's wrongful death allegations, and Nate's expert testimony linking the evidence to Trinity Heights' collapse. Evelyn submits it electronically, then leans back with exhaustion and triumph competing for expression. This changes everything. Victor can't suppress evidence that's already part of federal court record. We're building criminal referral now. What happens next? Victor responds, probably within hours. He'll file motions to dismiss attack credibility, argue Rebecca is unreliable narrator consumed by grief. Nate thinks about Victor's voice on the phone, the casual certainty that prosecution was impossible. He fights. Men like Victor don't surrender. Evelyn nods grimly. Then we force him. But Nathaniel, you need to take Rosie somewhere safe. Today. Victor's next move will be brutal. Fletcher's offer echoes. And Rosie doesn't need to watch her father go to war with a sociopath who's already demonstrated willingness to kill. Okay. We go to Fletcher's today. The sun is rising when Nate finally leaves Evelyn's office. He drives back to Selwood, finds Rosie awake and eating cereal like this is a normal morning. Daddy, you were gone all night. Are you okay? Nate sits beside her, takes her small hand. Sweetheart, we need to stay with Uncle Fletcher for a while. Things are getting complicated with grown-up problems and I need you somewhere safe. Rosie's expression shifts through confusion to understanding that's too mature for 7 years old. Is it because of the car that watches our building? The observation stops Nate's breath. You notice that? I'm not stupid, Daddy. Miss Harper says awareness is survival. She squeezes his hand. Are we in danger? Maybe. I'm trying to fix something that happened a long time ago. But I promise you'll be safe with Uncle Fletcher. Rosie considers this with the seriousness she brings to everything important. Miss Harper says truth is like math. It doesn't change because people don't believe it. You're doing the right thing, Daddy. Nate pulls her into a hug, breathes in the scent of her strawberry shampoo, and allows himself one moment of certainty that this path leads somewhere better than surrender. By 9 a.m. they're at Fletcher's loft. Nate's phone buzzes constantly with news alerts as media discovers the lawsuit. He ignores everything except Evelyn's updates. Victor filed countermotion at 8 a.m., requesting immediate dismissal. Hearing is in 3 days. 3 days later, Portland rain feels biblical. Nate wears the same thrift store suit from 3 years ago. Evelyn is beside him, Rebecca on his other side, radiating quiet determination. Victor Brennan enters the courtroom like he owns it, flanked by attorneys who look like they bill by the millisecond. He doesn't acknowledge Nate's existence. The message is clear. Nate is beneath notice. Judge Catherine Morrison presides with weary efficiency. She's 60-something reputation for fairness and intolerance for bullshit. The hearing is technical and aggressive. Victor's lead attorney argues that Morris Chen's recordings were obtained without consent, violate privacy laws. Evelyn counters that Morris was documenting workplace safety concerns that whistleblower protection supersedes. Judge Morrison listens without visible reaction, asks pointed questions. When both sides exhaust their arguments, she leans back. Mr. Brennan, your motion to dismiss is denied. The recordings may have privacy implications we'll address later, but whistleblower protection supersedes in cases involving public safety. This case proceeds to discovery. Trial date will be set pending completion of discovery phase. Denied. They won the first battle. Victor's face remains impassive, but something flickers in his eyes. Outside the courtroom, Rebecca touches Nate's arm. Thank you for being brave enough to stand up. The gratitude feels unearned. Nate isn't being brave, he's being desperate. The escalation arrives 3 hours later. Someone leaked to media disgraced architect who caused Trinity Heights collapse now suing the company. Within an hour, reporters camp outside Fletcher's building. Within 2 hours, someone publishes Nate's address, Rosie's school, Fletcher's workplace. Fletcher handles it with surprising calm. We can leave. I have a cabin in the Cascades. Running means abandoning the lawsuit, but staying means exposing Rosie to media circus. Rosie appears in the doorway, small and serious, holding Professor Trunks. "Daddy, there are people with cameras outside." "I know, sweetheart. They're reporters." "Are you going to talk to them?" Nate kneels to her eye level. "Would you be scared if I did?" "I'd be scared if you didn't, because hiding means they win." She squeezes his hands. "Miss Harper says truth is the best weapon, so tell them truth and make the bad people sorry they lied." Nate texts Evelyn, "I want to do a statement." 20 minutes later, Nate is standing on Fletcher's front steps reading from paper Evelyn dictated. "My name is Nathaniel Hawthorne. 3 years ago, my wife Catherine died in the Trinity Heights collapse along with 46 other people. I was blamed because I signed blueprints that contained fatal flaws. What I didn't know is that those blueprints were altered after I approved them. Materials were substituted, safety specifications, reduced warnings, ignored, all to save money. I'm not suing to avoid responsibility. I'm suing to ensure the people who actually caused those deaths face consequences. I'm doing it because my 7-year-old daughter taught me that truth matters more than comfort. Thank you." He turns and walks back inside before questions begin. Rosie is watching from the hallway, small smile suggesting approval. Evelyn texts, "Perfect. Now we wait for his response." The response comes at 7 p.m. Email from Victor's legal team: defamation lawsuit seeking $20 million, referral to Oregon State Bar for unauthorized practice of law, emergency custody evaluation for Rosie Hawthorne based on documented evidence of father's mental instability. The three-pronged attack is sophisticated and brutal. Nate reads it 3 times, feels something inside shift from fear to cold clarity. Victor wants war, but Victor has miscalculated. Nate has already lost everything worth losing except Rosie. And threatening her doesn't create compliance, it creates commitment. He calls Evelyn. "He wants war. Let's give him war." "Nathaniel, think about this. He's threatening Rosie. There is no middle ground. Either Victor faces consequences or he doesn't. I'm done negotiating with people who think children are acceptable tactical targets." "What are you proposing?" "We go nuclear. File criminal referral with FBI. Request RICO investigation for pattern of fraud and murder." Silence then. Evelyn's voice comes back different, harder. "I'll draft the referral tonight. But understand, once we file federal criminal allegations, there's no walking it back. We either destroy Victor completely or he destroys us." "I understand. File it." Rebecca texts, "I heard about Victor's threats. Thank you for not backing down. Morris would have liked you." Nate types response, "I'm doing what your husband tried to do. Only difference is, I'm desperate enough to finish it." Her reply, "Desperate people change the world. Comfortable people maintain it. You're exactly what this moment needs." Nate hopes she's right, because he's bet everything on the possibility that truth matters more than power. 14 months later. The federal courtroom in Portland seats 200. Every seat is filled. Nate recognizes faces from Catherine's funeral, from Trinity Heights memorials, from 3 years of guilt by newspaper. They're here to watch justice or vengeance or the spectacle of a sociopath finally cornered. Victor Brennan sits at the defense table in a suit that costs more than Nate's annual income, flanked by attorneys who've delayed this moment for 14 months through every procedural maneuver known to American jurisprudence. His expression is calm, almost bored. Even now, even with Morris Chen's recordings played in open court with Rebecca's testimony still echoing, Victor believes he'll walk. Rosie sits in the gallery beside Fletcher. She's 8 now, healthy, on medication the settlement advance purchased. She insisted on coming today, wanted to see the ending of the story her father had been writing, with testimony and depositions and sleepless nights. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The foreman stands. She's a middle school teacher, Nate learned during selection. She has daughters. She understands what fathers will do when the system fails them. "We have your honor." Judge Morrison accepts the verdict form, reads it without expression, hands it back. "Please read the verdict." "On the charge of wire fraud, guilty." Victor's expression doesn't change, but something flickers behind his eyes, the first crack in 30 years of invincibility. "On the charge of racketeering, guilty." Nate feels Evelyn's hand find his squeeze hard. Rebecca Chen is crying silently 2 rows back. "On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, guilty." The courtroom erupts. Judge Morrison's gavel cracks like thunder, restoring order. Victor Brennan, the man who thought leverage made him untouchable, is going to prison. Victor turns, finds Nate across the aisle. For the first time, his mask slips. The rage underneath is pure and genuine and completely impotent. Nate holds his gaze, doesn't smile, doesn't gloat, just looks at the man who killed his wife and 46 others and lets him see that desperate fathers don't forgive. "Mr. Brennan," Judge Morrison's voice cuts through, "you are remanded into custody pending sentencing. Bailiff." They take Victor in handcuffs. He doesn't resist, just walks out with the same professional calm, and Nate wonders if sociopaths feel anything when they finally lose, or if it's just another calculation gone wrong. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarm, but Nate walks past cameras to where Rosie is waiting on the steps. She's holding Professor Trunks even at 8 because some comforts transcend age. "Is it over, Daddy?" "It's over, sweetheart." She hugs him fiercely. "Miss Harper says justice is when truth wins." Did truth win? Nate looks back at the courthouse, thinks about Morris Chen's recordings about Rebecca's 14-month wait, about his own desperate gamble that integrity mattered more than survival. Yeah, baby. Truth won. The compensation comes to $12 million after legal fees and Rebecca's share. Nate establishes a trust for Rosie's medical care, donates $3 million to Trinity Heights Victims Fund, uses the rest to open a foundation providing free structural review for low-income housing projects. He never returns to architecture professionally, but he teaches building safety at Portland Community College, training the next generation to recognize when optimization becomes negligence. Rosie grows up healthy, knowing her father is the man who chose truth over safety, who taught her that integrity matters even when it costs everything. On the anniversary of Catherine's death, they visit Trinity Heights Memorial together, and Nate tells his daughter stories about the mother she barely remembers and the architect he used to be. Victor Brennan serves 18 years in federal prison before dying of stroke, unrepentant to the end. Montgomery Ashford's foundation continues serving foster children, his legacy complicated by truth that emerged too late to save him. And sometimes late at night, when Rosie is asleep and the world is quiet, Nate thinks about the night he stopped to help a stranger on a rainy highway, not knowing that simple act would unravel a conspiracy that destroyed his life before building it into something worth living. Because in the end, that's what truth does. It destroys before it heals, and the destruction is always worth it.